And then, they weren't. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And if you have ever been on either side of this, either the one who disappeared or the one left behind wondering what went wrong, this video is going to explain something that nobody has ever told you clearly. Because here is what most people assume when someone cuts them off without warning: they must be angry. I must have done something wrong. They never really cared about me. But psychology tells a completely different story. The truth is, the person who went quiet, who stopped replying, who removed themselves without a single word of explanation, they are not cold. They are not heartless. They are not even angry at you. They are exhausted in a way that words stop being able to describe. And today we are going to go deep into the real psychology behind why some people disappear without warning, why they don't explain themselves, and why, once they are gone, they almost never come back. Stay until, because that last part is the one that will change how you see yourself forever. Let's start with something that happened long before the silence. Because people who cut others off without warning, they did not wake up one day and decide to disappear. This was not a sudden decision. It was the last step of a very long, very exhausting process that had been building for months, sometimes years. Think about it. Before the silence, there were signs they gave, quietly, a text that took longer to reply to, a plan they canceled one too many times, a conversation where they smiled but their eyes said something different. They were already leaving, slowly, invisibly, long before they actually left. Here is why. Dr. Stephen Porges, a neuroscientist at the University of North Carolina, developed what is called the polyvagal theory, and it explains everything. Your nervous system, the system that controls how you respond to the world, has three modes. The first is social engagement mode. This is when you feel safe. You talk, you laugh, you connect, you pick up the phone, you show up, you try. The second is fight or flight. This is when you feel threatened, you argue, you defend, you push back. But the third mode, this is the one nobody talks about. It is called the dorsal vagal response, and in simple terms it means total shutdown. When a person's nervous system has been overwhelmed, when they have given too much, absorbed too much, tried too many times, the brain does not choose fight or flight. It chooses something quieter. It chooses withdrawal, complete, silent, total withdrawal. No explanation, no goodbye, no final conversation, just gone. Because here is what the brain decides at that point. Explaining this will cost me more energy than I have left. They will not understand anyway. The only way to survive this is to stop. And so they stop. Not because they hate you, not because you are worthless, but because their nervous system reached a point where one more conversation felt like one more thing they could not survive. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who experienced repeated emotional disappointment in relationships developed a significantly higher tendency toward what researchers called preemptive withdrawal, cutting contact before the situation could hurt them again. In other words, they left first, not out of cruelty, out of protection. And here is what makes this even more fascinating. Researchers at Harvard Medical School found that people who tend towards silent withdrawal often have higher emotional intelligence than average, not lower. They read people deeply, they notice patterns quickly, they see the ending coming long before anyone else does, and when they see it, they make a quiet, calculated, deeply painful decision to protect what little peace they have left. That is not coldness. That is someone who has learned the hard way. Now, here is where it gets personal. Because the question is not just why people disappear without warning. The real question is, where did they learn that silence was safer than words? And for most people who do this, the answer goes back to a place they rarely talk about. It goes back to childhood. Psychologist John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, spent decades studying how early relationships shape the way we connect and disconnect as adults. And what he found was this. Children who grew up in environments where expressing emotions was not safe, where speaking up led to punishment, dismissal, or being ignored, those children learned something very early. They learned that words don't work. Maybe they tried to explain how they felt and were told they were being dramatic. Maybe they asked for something and were made to feel like a burden. Maybe they cried and were left alone until they stopped. So they adapted, they became quiet. They learned to process everything internally. They learned that the only reliable source of peace was the one they created inside themselves. Psychologist Murray Bowen called this emotional cutoff. It is a pattern where a person, unable to resolve emotional pain within a relationship, simply creates distance instead. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much, and they have no safe place to put it. And here is the part that breaks my heart a little every time I think about it. These people, the ones who disappear without warning, they are usually the ones who stayed the longest. They were the ones who gave chance after chance, who forgave things they probably shouldn't have forgiven, who absorbed behavior that would have broken most people years earlier. They did not leave at the first sign of trouble. They stayed through the second, the third, the 10th. And when they finally left, when the silence finally came, it was not impulsive. It was the decision of someone who had run completely, utterly out of road. A landmark study from the University of Michigan found that people who exhibit avoidant attachment patterns, the ones most likely to cut contact silently, actually experience higher levels of internal emotional pain than those who express conflict openly. They are not feeling less, they are feeling more, and choosing to carry it alone because experience taught them that sharing it only made things worse. So if someone disappeared from your life without a word, understand this. Their silence was not about you being unworthy of an explanation. Their silence was about them being too depleted to give one. There is a difference, and that difference matters enormously. So now we arrive at the part that actually matters. Whether you are the one who disappeared or the one they disappeared from, there is something you need to hear. If you are the one who went quiet, you are not broken. You are not a bad person. You are not incapable of love or connection. You are someone who learned, through real pain, real disappointment, real exhaustion, that your peace is not something everyone deserves access to. And yes, sometimes the silence you chose felt like the only breath of air in a room that had been slowly suffocating you for years. But here's what I want you to also hear. Silence can be protection, and silence can also become a prison. There is a difference between cutting off someone who is genuinely draining you and building walls so high that even the right people cannot reach you. The CDC reports that chronic social isolation increases the risk of early mortality by 26%. Not because connection is weakness, but because humans are literally wired to need it. The goal is not to open your door to everyone. The goal is to find the few people worth opening it for, and then actually open it. Harvard's famous 75-year study on adult development, the longest happiness study ever conducted, found one single variable that predicted life satisfaction above everything